Okay, hi guys, it's great to be here. So I work for Marvell and Taras works for PL Vision. So, wait, sorry about that. So I think David said that SONiC is really growing in a lot of areas. And I think it's really exciting for SONiC. And I think the main message is that we're going beyond the data center. Yes, data center is the main focus. That's the most important part of SONiC. But we've seen that that SONiC is actually moving in other directions. So what does it mean to go beyond data center? So SONiC itself is very modular and a scalable architecture. And as everybody here can see, it has a very strong community behind it. And I think we're ready to expand beyond the data center. Like David said in the opening statement, that we're going in a lot of new directions. So what is PoE? PoE is basically an enterprise feature. And it's used to power endpoint devices. And this is like totally not data center oriented, right? Because in data center, you don't need PoE to have power, right? Also, I think that PoE is the first step. It's a small step for SONiC because it just fits so well into the architecture. But it's a great step to move forward into having, like David said, a standard NOS that will be like the go-to solution for open networking. Sorry. So, like I said, this is a joint venture between Marvell and PL Vision. Marvell has been doing PoE-based switches for the last 20 years in the division that I work in the networking. And we're a partnership with all the big PoE vendors, Microsemi, Analog Device, TI, and we have this solution working. And recently, Marvell helped to contribute to the SAI and add the SONiC attributes. We'll talk about it next. And Taras, please.
And from PL Vision side, so we've been working with SONiC for quite some time, maybe from all its beginning, and we've been partnering with Marvell to make this feature available in the SONiC for all of us to benefit from.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about three things and a takeaway. We'll give you a short introduction into PoE. We'll talk about the SAI object that we added to support PoE in the SAI. And then Taras will take it to talk about PoE in the SONiC and the takeaways. Okay, so what is PoE? PoE is a method of delivering DC power using Ethernet cables between a power supplier and a power device, okay? And this is only supported over over copper cables. Okay, so you can see here in the architecture, we have the switch, and it's actually, in our case, that's going to be the power sourcing equipment. It's going to supply power to the endpoint, and I gave here three examples. One of them is a camera, for example, a security camera. It can be a wireless router, or it can be an IP phone. Okay, and PoE is defined by IEEE standards. Historically, it's 802.3AF and AT, and there's a new standard called BT, which even allows supplying even more power. And for management, SNP management, we have RFC 3621 that describes how power is managed using SNP. Okay, so this is an example of a Marvell platform in this case, DX35XX. And here you can see that we try to talk about the different PoE manageable objects that we have and try to map them into some kind of a physical topology. So the first thing we have is the PoE device. In our case, the PoE device is it's going to be represented by this MCU Cortex M3. And what this microcontroller is going to do, it's going to power management, the power on the system level. Okay, the power is coming from the PSU. You can see it on the orange on the left side. And someone has to manage the power on a global level. That means decide where to give power, how to, which PSE should get more power or less power. Then the second object that we have is the PSE. The PSE is the actual chips that gives the power, and they can internally manage themselves, but they're unaware of other PSE chips in the system. That's why you need the PoE device. And at the end, the power goes to the port, and that's another object that we have called PoE port. And here also we support PoE attributes like priority and admin status. And also we can read the delivering status of power. So if I'm trying to go over the attributes that we contributed into the SAI version 1.14, that was just accepted. So on the PoE device, we have the following attributes. We can define the power limit mode. We support 2 modes. One of them is class-based. This is based on the power device that you connect. It gets identified, and then that limits the power. Or there is another mode where we can limit the power per port. That means a certain port cannot get more than, let's say, 5 watts or 10 watts or 8 watts. So that is a global attribute. And then we have a lot of read-only attributes, like what's the total power available, what's the consumption of all the PoE device connected, what PoE ports exist and are active, who are the PSE objects or PSE hardware that we have on the board, and the hardware revision of the PoE object. The PSE, like I said, these are the chips that actually provides the power, but these chips don't manage the power, at least not in the SAI object, and we just offer a read-only attribute of status. So one of them is status, to see that the chip is active or inactive, the temperature. Because these chips are providing power, there are cases where they get heated and things like that, so you need that. And of course, the software and hardware version. And I think the final object that we have is the PoE port. This is actually where most of the management happens. So you have an admin status where you can enable or disable power. You have the power limit that I talked before, where you can limit the level of power you want in watts that you want this port to be able to deliver. There is port priority. Port priority is a very interesting attribute. Since usually there is not enough power in the system to power all the ports, having a port priority of high, medium level, medium and low allows you to give different priorities. So if there is not enough power in the system, only the high priority ports will work. For example, if you want to get your IP cameras, make sure that they keep working, so you'll put them in high priority. And then we have, in the read-only attributes, we have PoE standards, which is AT or AF, which is PoE and PoE plus. You have the PoE status, is it delivering power or not? A detailed status, if it's not delivering, what's the reason? And what's the current power consumption for that port? Taras, please.
So, and as we all know, SAI is good, and this is the essential foundation building block for SONiC. So, but in order to feature to work, having it inside is not enough. So what we've been doing and what we are proposing now to the SONiC community is to extend it with the new functionality to manage the PoE-enabled devices, the so-called PSE, as Gai was talking about previously. The main idea is to utilize the extensibility of the SONiC, because we know adding a new feature to SONiC is quite simple and obvious, and to build it on top of the already accepted PoE SAI attributes. And the main idea here is to have 2 major points of integration. So the guy was presenting the way where we have the MCU running within the chip itself. There is also the way there is MCU is the separate microcontroller. Depending on the platform, how it's built by the ODM, it can be either or. So the plan is to support both of these cases. That's why we have these PoE attributes in SAI, so you can have it built into your MCU, or you can have it as a separate chipset, depends on your board design. And then standard things to support the standard SONiC configuration path and having the way to configure it, manage it, and additionally to integrate it with the other SONiC components like LLDP, because the BT standard, it's optional, but highly recommended to have the LLDP integration to have the power-up support. So how we did it? It's basically really, really simple. I believe this picture for the SONiC community is already being, I don't know, known, and if you see it from far away, it looks like everything is the same. But I want to explain what I wanted to show here, that by following the standard way of adding the new functionality, a new Docker container for the management is introduced, a new SAI attributes for the management and new SAI switch is introduced. Thus, we have the changes in the VSS container, and we have PoE in this VSS, and we can have the optional external PoE syncd container. And I wanted to get back to the discussion, to the talk, the explanation I was giving previously. In one box, we have the single chip, single die, which gives us the networking and the PoE management. So it's controlled by the same SAI from the same vendor. Like Guy was talking 90XDX 35 something. I don't remember exactly, sorry. So, and in some other platforms, you don't have this tight integration. So usually you are going to the well-known PoE device suppliers, Microchip, Analog Devices, or TI. You are getting the MCU from them. So it will be separate. So by combining this ability, we can have PoE tightly coupled for the cost efficiency of the platforms, or we can have it separate for easier manageability or for better combination. So we can have the NPU from vendor A, and you can have the PoE from vendor B controlled by different SAI libraries. So here, the main components which are highlighted. So as I said already, the manager, the main idea of the PoED manager is to provide the SONiC config path, provide the CLI, work with database, and save and store configuration. For the PoE syncd and PoE container, this is the integration point for the SAI from PoE vendors to be linked with. And as I was explaining previously, it can be either or, same chip or different chips. And the idea is to support these both cases. I believe it's for all of us that are following SONiC, it sounds really, really, really similar to something. And I will give you an answer to what. It's the gearbox. So we have similar concept. You can have your files built into your ASIC. You can have your files as the gearbox, as a separate chip on the board. Same concept here. So we didn't reinvent the wheel. We just utilized the infrastructure which is already available and known to be working. And the main takeaways, first of all, why we did it. I believe the PoE is the first and essential step for the access in enterprise networks. All the IP cameras, all the office equipment usually is powered by PoE. It's more convenient, it's more cost efficient, it requires less cabling and easier management. So this is the first essential step. And we've been working with Marvell to utilize their huge experience in building the underlying control plane and devices and integration with the PoE vendors. And then we've utilized our experience in SONiC to enable this feature in SONiC. Then I want to be quite open with you here. It was in parallel activity, but we've realized that there was the new work group started in SONiC called PANS, PoE Enterprise Network SONiC. And we're basically collaborating now, and we are taking quite active participation within the PANS itself, which basically follow the same goals, is to enable enterprise use case within the SONiC. So why? Because we want to have the standard Linux in the networking. And I believe some of the companies that are member in SONiC, they even named this. SONiC is the new networking is in the Linux. And thank you, and we're ready to get the questions.
Just a quick note, we got a wonderful suggestion that before you ask your question, if you can tell us your name and which organization you're from, I think this is a great opportunity for the community to know who's in the room as well. So if you can do that, that would be great.
Thank you. Luka Perko from Sartora here. I'm just wondering, are you aware of the mainline Linux PoE effort that has been underway?
Yes, we are.
And is there a plan to utilize this within the SONiC?
It's a tricky question, and I believe the answer will be depends. As of today, the way how mainline kernel implements PoE is not enough to cover all use cases. And it definitely has its own benefits, especially I would say within the lower end tier of the equipment. When you try to have the flexibility of disaggregated solution as we propose it here, it's allowed to have the faster and easier support for wider set of devices. Now, with taking the upstream approach, as of today, as to the best of my knowledge, the support is only for the one vendor and for the one specific board, which I don't know how we can easily scale within the SONiC environment.
Okay, just a small correction. It's actually for 2 PSC controllers that support has been added.
But from one vendor.
2 vendors.
2 vendors, okay, sorry. Yeah. Then I was mistaken.
Okay, it will definitely be interesting to see how this develops further. Thank you.
Luke Williams from B Networks. So you guys are working on implementing this PoE. Is this going to be a separate distribution of SONiC that would be designed more for edge, or is this going to be something that's also going to be incorporated into the main bundle of SONiC, and then it'll detect what devices it's used, like what devices installed on?
That's a really great question, which requires, I believe, a much wider discussion. Plan now to include it in the mainline, let's say, community SONiC. I would rather stop using the community in it, but name it SONiC. This is the SONiC. Then how we will structure the deliverables from SONiC. Is it the separate flavor for the separate market? Is it all in one? Is it like the enterprise distribution from some companies? This is the decision. But the plan here to do it in the open source, put it back to the community, so it will be the part of SONiC.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Hi, Taras. Amir, B Networks. So right now you're working with Marvell. Any other SAI partners that you guys are onboarding?
I would, it's a tricky question again, and thanks for it. Guy was saying that there were different vendors, and I will allow you to answer this.
Yes, there is a lot of vendors that Marvell is working with. Like I said, Analog Device, TI, Microsemi. So I think the SAI solution is, first of all, it's compatible to the standard and gives you all the basic, let's call it attribute. And it also supports different ways to control the PoE. One of them is using this MCU, which is a separate chip, or in our case, it's an integrated service CPU that we run the firmware we get from the PoE vendor. And it actually does the real-time power management across the board, okay? But you can also use the same SAI solution, the same object, in order to manage each PSE as a separate chip. So I think the SAI is really flexible. It supports all the hardware variants that I know of. And it also, in case where you don't have an MCU that is actually doing all the heavy lifting in the real time, then the SAI implementation will have to do it. And I think that's why that's a better way, or a better way forward than trying to put it inside the kernel, because in the kernel you will not be able to actually do power management. You will be able to configure some kind of control device, but you will not be able to react to changes in power and things like that.
And just to add, it's part of the SAI, it's part of the official standard as of version 1.14. So any PoE equipment vendor is welcome to step in and contribute their implementation of SAI to benefit the whole community.
Yeah, Marvell also intends to contribute the SAI implementation as a reference. So anyone who wants to look at it can use it, definitely.
All right, thank you, Guy and Taras.
Hi, good presentation. This is Saurabh Kapoor from Dell. It's good to see SONiC going beyond data center use cases to bring in some of the campus edge kind of capabilities there. Earlier in the session, we learned, that SONiC is a pretty heavy NOS and, it's loaded. Campus edge use cases, we see that switches run pretty lean on CPU and memory. We bring in the PoE capabilities in the main SONiC community code. So it'll be a little bit of a challenge, when we see that functioning there. Any thoughts, any proposals around creating a separate SONiC binary for these light use cases?
I would like you to hold on to this question because the next presentation we will talk about, we will cover part of the answer to this. So I don't want to steal the answer from the presentation because they will not have nothing to talk about on the next.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it is important to remember that there is, like Tara says, there is two ways to work. And one of the ways is to have it integrated inside the SAI of the switch. And in that case, it doesn't require any more containers or any more code, right? So it doesn't have, let's call it a real cost unless you have PoE and unless you want that PoE to be as a separate container because it's a separate subsystem in your board, okay? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.